So, PlayStation recently had their latest State of Play, and it was just kind of fine, I guess. I do think Kenna Bridge of Spirits might be one of the sleeper hits coming later this year. Definitely a game I'm keeping an eye on along with Deathloop. Never underestimate Arcane. Nintendo also finally had a direct, and it was additionally just kind of fine. Skyward Sword getting a remaster was pretty cool, although not the announcement many of us were hopeful for. Nintendo somehow charging $60 for a remaster with little changes compared to what competitors have produced with their remasters is something that only Nintendo could get away with. During this event, a new Star Wars game was announced, not developed by Electronic Arts, but Zynga. This is basically like watching one of the CW's high-quality TV offerings and then flipping the channel to watch A Little Late with Lily Singh. Zynga's Star Wars Hunter is a free-to-play online third-person competitive shooter coming to Switch and mobile, which will most certainly be packed with microtransactions, just like New York City is with Fallout like mole rats. Another event that happened recently was BlizzCon Online, and that too was kinda quiet. These events somewhat lack the intrigue without an audience. Of course, Nintendo Directs are always pre-recorded, but there's something beautiful about Red Shirt Guy asking Blizzard uncomfortable questions they don't wish to answer. Hello, and welcome to the latest Legacy Killer HD Direct. My name is Craig, and I'm proud to announce videos are in development. If you were expecting anything more, then you truly do not understand how these video game events work. Now to the Q&A portion of our event, to our first question.
Yeah, any reason for you accepting millions of dollars from insert human rights breaking country and being photographed having drinks with their leader while saying on Twitter you stand for social justice? I mean, look at your outfit.
This has concluded the Q&A portion of our event. Thank you for coming. In regards to BlizzCon, it probably also didn't help that all of Blizzard's announcements were leaked ahead of time, but really the only notable thing that happened was Twitch having to mute Metallica and play their own music to avoid a DMCA claim. While that is funny and just shows how broken Twitch is, it also is a reality that Metallica created all those years ago when they sued Napster. After eating Arby's and that immediate rush to the 7-Eleven toilets, what goes down in that filthy, smelly bathroom is what the big companies think about human rights. That's why when any of these multi-billion-dollar corporations put out statements here in the West condemning whatever someone said or did, it's a bit meaningless when you look to their actions in other parts of the world, and how they won't dare speak ill of Winnie the Pooh and his atrocities because of, well, his pot of gold. I bring this up as Capcom becomes the latest to bend the knee to China, as in their Capcom Arcade Stadium release on Stadia, one of the packages includes Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, and it includes one very noticeable change in which Hong Kong received an update, now sporting the Chinese flag. Of course, many are outraged by this, but these companies face no consequences for these decisions. My stomach and asshole face more consequences after eating the dog food burritos from Taco Bell. China is a massive market, and you only get in if you play by the government's rules, which especially in gaming, China unzips and these AAA corporations will drop to their knees faster than a Bella Danger does. But today we have a lot of gaming news to break down, and you probably should consider subscribing, turning notifications on, liking the video, and leaving a comment below with your thoughts. Been a little bit slow on uploads as of late. I'm working on a lot of longer form content, so hopefully I'll have that up soon, but regardless, in terms of highly anticipated AAA games expected this year, there's been some pretty unfortunate news as of late with a few of them. Dying Light 2 is just a mess right now, with developer Techland falling apart as employees are abandoning ship because of terrible management. As was the case with Cyberpunk 2077, the management have set unrealistic deadlines and lack direction. As the gamer reported from one source, horrible management decisions and lack of a coherent vision are what made people just slowly spiral into an apathetic state. That and the constant changes that end up forcing people to scrap their work. Another source said, "What is going on in Techland is just total chaos, not iteration." Even more concerning, a developer who has worked on Dying Light 2 for multiple years said they had no idea what the final game will be or what the story is. It's changed so much, people kept quitting, getting fired. I do have to admit, Dying Light 2 was one of my most anticipated games when we saw that first gameplay footage, and now I'm beyond the word concerned, especially after the release of another Polish-developed game a few months ago. Also, for those wondering about Techland's response, pretty much it can be summarized as they didn't deny the claims, but said that they were unaware of the issues, which that just does not sound good at all. Another game which might even be in a worse state is Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2, which has now been delayed beyond 2021, and the publisher removed, or well, they just fired the developers Hardsuit Labs working on the game, who have now suffered major layoffs. It's honestly astonishing a game that looked nearly complete a number of months ago, with all of the boatloads of pre-order bonuses and expansion plans announced, has suffered an almost complete collapse. For a while now, there has been massive concerns, as publisher Paradox shocked everyone in August 2020 when they fired the creative director and lead narrative designer. Whether that be Dead Island 2 or Duke Nukem Forever, I really can't think of a game that fired its entire development team and then was able to recover. Maybe this project will have different luck, but again, it just looks like another AAA disaster. This games industry produces them as frequently as Steven Seagal stars in some shitty low-budget circle jerk of an action movie. Speaking of failure, Marvel's Avengers is back in the news for a baffling reason. This game was supposed to be a live service money train for Square Enix, but it has been everything but that. The game has lost at least 97% of its players based on Steam charts. It is a sales failure, creating massive losses for publisher Square Enix. Based on reports last year, Marvel's Avengers had not recouped its development costs, key post-launch content has been delayed, and honestly, this game has been quickly forgotten. In my review of Avengers, I found it rather lackluster with a really bad loot system and endgame. Add this to the extensive list of mistakes made, but Avengers game is now being made more grindy. Yes, you heard that right. As reported by PC Gamer, it was explained in a blog post that the current leveling curve is not really a curve and players level at a steady rate. So brace yourself, this has led to pacing issues, such as skill points currently being rewarded too fast, which may be confusing and overwhelming to newer players. We want each decision to invest in a skill or heroic to be more meaningful. So that's why they're making the game more grindy. Reading through the lines, I think the real reason for this decision is to keep players playing the game for a longer period of time, especially newer ones. It was also announced that in-game cosmetics are being overhauled with the goal providing more player agency and clarity about how to obtain them by removing randomness from the process. Anyway, it definitely seems like Avengers game is on its last leg and preparing for a free-to-play move. Will that work? Who knows, but this game has thus far been a great lesson in why jumping on the live service bandwagon doesn't always work. Something that has also not worked is Google Stadia. As we recently learned, Google is scaling back their initial goals with their service. What that means is a bunch of developers were fired, their internal studios were shut down, games were cancelled, and now they are turning their focus to offering Stadia to third parties. They view this as a long-term strategy, one that can make Stadia successful. To the rest of the world, this looks like yet another massive corporation in over their head and truly not understanding how to make it in this games industry. Amazon has had similar trouble jumping on all trends of this industry but failing to produce anything meaningful, at least yet. Now, in terms of Google Stadia's sudden collapse, this honestly was the expectation a lot of us had from day one, considering Google's well-documented history of abandoning projects. What's most interesting, though, is reporting coming via Kotaku points to the leadership of Stadia praising their development studios for the great progress on their games just 1 week before firing all of them. Phil Harrison, the man in charge of Google's gaming endeavor, and also Walking Grim Reaper, who was responsible to a degree for the disastrous launches of both the PlayStation 3 and Xbox One, reportedly told Stadia developers that he knew they were all being fired and the studios were being shut down when he praised their work just 1 week before everything was cancelled. Additional reports from both Bloomberg and Wired have continued to expose just how disastrous Google has been at running and supporting Stadia. Like, the only way they managed to get Red Dead Redemption 2 and other AAA blockbusters on their service was by dishing out tens of millions of dollars. I think that money could have been better invested in other areas, but whatever. Ultimately, Google didn't know what they were doing. They rushed Stadia to market, made bold promises no one believed, had a troubled and complicated hiring process, and restricted certain resources like game development software over quote-unquote security concerns. Unfortunately, I honestly always believed that Stadia was destined for this quick collapse. Interestingly, Phil Harrison did reportedly cite one other reason for their decision to end game development, and that was Microsoft's move to acquire Bethesda's parent company. This is somewhat of a strange reason, but I think it kinda can make a little sense. Microsoft Microsoft has been lacking in the exclusive department for a long time, and them going out and spending $7+ billion on Bethesda shocked everyone. But ultimately, this will solve their exclusivity problem. They eventually could have a lineup on par with PlayStation, and Google really wouldn't be able to compete with that unless they were willing to invest further, which they weren't. I do think that this is Google throwing blame for their failure, although I do wonder if there is a bit of truth there, in the sense that Google viewed being competitive with Xbox as an option until they coughed up some cash and purchased one of gaming's biggest publishers with a lot of well-known IP. Even with Stadia's downward spiral, things might actually continue to get worse as legal action is going to be taken against them and also id Software and Bungie. You see, Google made quite a few big promises with Stadia's launch and did not deliver on many of them. The service was essentially in beta. Now though, they are being sued over their misleading statements. The 42 breach of contract lawsuit alleges Google and developers Bungie Inc. and id Software LLC misled gamers by claiming in the run-up to Stadia's November 2019 release that the cloud-based no-console required service was more powerful than Microsoft's Xbox One X and Sony's PlayStation 4 Pro combined, and that every game on Stadia would be playable at 4K resolution. That last part is what's getting them in significant trouble. The lawsuit alleges that Google only walked back these claims after already generating revenue and a customer base with their misleading remarks about what Stadia could do. The lawsuit was moved to New York federal court last month and alleges Google has violated consumer protection laws in all 50 states and the District of Columbia. The plaintiff is seeking for current and former Stadia subscribers to secure monetary damages and a court order requiring Google to publicly display the viewing resolution in frames per second of each game sold on Stadia. Essentially, Google is being sued for lying and not making clear the limitations of Stadia. In late 2019, it was found that 4K resolution promise was mostly BS, as games like Destiny 2 and Red Dead 2 were caught upscaling lower resolutions. So Bungie and id Software find themselves involved because their games were used to highlight and market how great Stadia was, when in reality, Google knowingly exaggerated the quality and power of their service and never properly communicated the truth. Since we are on the subject of lawsuits, EA recently defeated one brought against FIFA Ultimate Team. As Eurogamer reports, in November 2020, 3 Californians said EA was secretly manipulating them in a lawsuit that revolved around a patented AI technology known as dynamic difficulty adjustment. The patent is known as technology that unfairly affects the results of matches in a bid to encourage more spending on packs. The lawsuit was dismissed after EA provided detailed technical information and access to speak with their engineers. In a statement, EA claimed ensuring play is fair is critical to all of us at EA, and we've tried to be as clear as possible that this commitment applies to us just as much as it does to our players. Look, EA can say whatever they want. We've talked about these suspicious patents over the years, and just because they have not been implemented now doesn't mean that they won't be implemented years from now. Each of the top publishers of this industry have filed for some downright shady patents which involve manipulation of matchmaking to boost revenue. That isn't needed now. Ultimate Team is rolling in cash thanks to the manipulative use of loot boxes. Eventually though, there's always a need for higher profits, and I simply do not trust this company to do the right thing. In other news, Anthem 2.0 is dead. I have a more detailed video coming on this because there's a lot that I think people just don't know about the situation and what's going on with BioWare, but for now, all I can say is that I'm not surprised. I actually think the right decision would have been to end Anthem's development a year ago, and not drag this out if they weren't committed to doing it. I was always skeptical of Anthem Next, unsure how EA could even draw interest back into this without investing tons of resources. Then there was the issue of how would they monetize this experience, free to play maybe with cosmetic microtransactions, that could have been an option. Anyway, Anthem's dead, both as a game and a franchise, as BioWare turns their attention back to Dragon Age and Mass Effect. It is worth noting that in their statement announcing the end of Anthem 2.0, BioWare claimed that the pandemic played a role in this not happening. In a later report from Bloomberg, it was revealed that Electronic Arts has removed the Dragon Age 4 multiplayer component mandate live serviceness, which was being forced on BioWare. That means Dragon Age 4 will be a single-player RPG, and the reason why that is happening is of course to do with the failure of the live service Anthem, but also because of EA's executives being surprised and impressed by Respawn Entertainment's massive successful single-player game, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. While that is great news, I think there is enormous pressure on the once-beloved developer to deliver, and if they don't, well, Mass Effect Andromeda's future DLC was cancelled, the Montreal studio was shut down, and the franchise was on hiatus until Anthem released and just was not very good, and also was a flop. Now Anthem's future is over, and one does have to wonder how many chances are left for BioWare. Now, hours before this announcement, EA's Chief Studios Officer Laura Meal conducted an interview with IGN claiming that they are putting the future of its franchises into its studio's hands, which I guess wasn't the case with Anthem as EA pulled the plug on that. This overall interview is a fluff piece, which is what you see often from this industry. EA will always search for easy, good PR, and the industry will always give it in return. But at one point, this EA executive was asked what does it mean when EA and its studios will listen to players, and she responded by saying there's a lot of creative autonomy within Electronic Arts, but there are certain values and principles we have as a company that we just couldn't allow to be compromised. Next, the Cyberpunk 2077 saga continues. Following the last disaster, which was the developer being hacked with source code and tons of internal documents being stolen, Bloomberg reported further damage as developers were severely disrupted from working on Cyberpunk updates. Apparently, most employees remain unable to log into the company's virtual private network, making it impossible to access the systems and tools needed to do most of their jobs, which is why CDPR's announcement recently that they were pushing back their next update to the second half of March really isn't all that surprising, but just the latest in debacle surrounding Cyberpunk 2077. One question that always follows these high-profile disasters is how the rest of this industry views what has happened. We've already seen some of that with Cyberpunk 2077, in which a gaming CEO, Thomas Maller, blasted CD Projekt Red for false advertising and misleading players over the years. Then we also have Star Wars Battlefront 2. Within and outside of Electronic Arts, we saw many companies very nervous by the outrage surrounding loot box monetization, with many since abandoning it. With Cyberpunk 2077, the biggest issue was that the game released unfinished, buggy, and broken, especially on consoles, and recently Take-Two Interactive's Strauss Zelnick, who is the CEO who oversees both Rockstar games and 2K games, addressed the disastrous launch. An analyst asked Zelnick about the sustainability of the current pace of AAA game development, and then added as an example, there was a competing game that came out recently that was highly anticipated, where I think it was a clear case of that the studio's reach exceeding their grasp. That clearly being a reference to Cyberpunk 2077, and Zelnick responded by saying, I think the case that you're alluding to reflects the fact that you're always better served to wait for perfection, if you can create perfection. And all of our labels are seeking perfection, and we don't always succeed, sometimes we fall short, but that's the goal. So yes, right, and it's great that Rockstar Games continues to put out add-on content and additional content for Grand Theft Auto Online and Red Dead Online, but they've put out content that they really believe in, that they're passionate about, and that is of the highest possible quality. And that means we're not on a weekly cadence, and we're not going to be, and that means we don't necessarily know the exact release date, but what we do know is that we will wait for it to be as close to perfect as anything can be. That might be the case with most Rockstar experiences. I don't think that relates to the online, but Take-Two Interactive is also the company that published WWE 2K20, one of the most buggy and broken games in recent memory. But look, Rockstar Games is a company that CD Projekt Red's executives look up to, and one of the things that I personally respect about their experiences is the fact that the games feel complete and features tons of innovation. Rockstar has earned their reputation. Their PC ports have notably had well-documented issues with bugs, but the actual games of Grand Theft Auto 5 and Red Dead Redemption 2 never felt like they were missing tons of content and basic features. And that's because they took their time, something that CD Projekt Red had with Cyberpunk 2077, but still released the game anyway. To the final big topic, we have to talk about the outrage surrounding Hogwarts Legacy, the RPG set in the Harry Potter universe coming from Avalanche Software. This game has already garnered some outrage in the past because of J.K. Rowling profiting from it. Her turf views have in recent years come under fire from many in the media and on Twitter. The latest debacle surrounds developer Troy Levitt, who is a lead designer on the Harry Potter RPG, and in the past he ran a YouTube channel which I guess was non-liberal, critical of Anita Sarkeesian, and supportive of the ethics and journalism aspect of GG. So if you were curious of how games media treated this developer, they all ran with the same headline accusing him of being alt-right, and some even calling for his firing. Borderline defamatory remarks in my opinion, opinion. See, the thing is, the biggest crime of Levitt's YouTube channel is maybe some bad takes. This quite literally feels like games media searching for a story when there isn't anything there. The developer critical of the GG movement never endorsed harassment of anyone, and only was offering support for ethics and journalism, that argument. See, the issue in this industry, we can't have these nuanced conversations because criticism is branded as something far worse by many. Reset Era, the gaming forum, recently decided it would ban all conversation surrounding the game due to quote-unquote the designer's bigoted views. On his YouTube channel, Levitt previously stated that some of you have expressed that due to my commentary on some games industry controversies and my sympathies for the GG movement, that I might have a difficult time should I ever want to return to professional game development. I'm happy to say that even though I disclosed my YouTube channel to WB Games, it didn't appear to be an issue for them. Not that they endorse anything that I've said, of course, but at least they seem more concerned with making good games than with pushing some kind of social justice agenda, so there is hope. That's a remark that he made a couple of years ago before he joined the project and the developer in charge of making this Harry Potter RPG. Now, Anita Sarkeesian, a controversial gaming figure who has also been criticized by Levitt, mocked this statement on Twitter by saying, "I'm happy to say that even though I disclosed my hateful, misogynistic, and regressive YouTube channel to WB Games, it didn't appear to be an issue for them, and I get to continue being a successful game designer on a major project with no consequences." The simplest thing I can say about this situation is that it feels like a smear campaign, one that we've seen multiple times in the past. Daniel Vavra, known for his work in the Mafia franchise, went through a similar situation with Kingdom Come Deliverance, which many in games media tried getting him fired or cancelled for his views, but all they achieved was bringing more publicity and attention to his game Kingdom Come Deliverance, which led to huge sales. His studio Warhorse Studios was later purchased by Koch Media, and I'm certain Daniel Vavra, one of the founders, made millions from the deal. The thing is, I don't even share most of the views that either of these two developers have. I don't agree with much of it, but I do recognize how insane this games industry is and how unaccepting they are towards non-liberal views. I'm sorry to say, games media, there's a lot of people that don't share your politics, and you can't just label them all as alt-right. As Eric Kane wrote on his diabolical Substack, he too called the situation a smear campaign and concluded, "I am not necessarily defending Levitt's arguments, many of which I disagree with, though not all. I am defending his right to make these arguments and not face losing his employment. I do not think that this is a black and white issue." The issue is, many in this industry do in fact see it as that. Gaming has a wide array of voices, but the problem I've talked about for years is that only one perspective holds the power, which is why most game developers and even journalists are forced to shut up and hide their true political thoughts and feelings in fear of being branded as something that they aren't and possibly even being fired, something that Levitt is now facing. But so far, Warner Brothers has remained quiet and have not responded to any requests for comment. Hogwarts Legacy is not even a game that I'm excited for, but a lot of the outrage is just completely overblown, and as was the case with Kingdom Come Deliverance, the situation might even sell more copies of the game. One of the concerns was that Levitt's involvement would creatively hurt the project because I'm sure every game you played and liked was made from someone with left-leaning views, right? Also, if it's not clear, I'm being sarcastic. And based on recent news, it doesn't even seem J.K. Rowling's views are impacting development decisions, which probably should have been obvious in the first place. Anyway, just a lot of nonsense going on in this AAA games industry as usual, but let me know your thoughts on everything that we did discuss today down in the comments section below. But thank you for watching. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this video or if you found any informative value, and make sure to follow my other social media accounts for updates on new videos. Links are always down in the description below. I'm most active on Twitter, giving opinions on news that I do not always get into video forums, so do make sure to follow me over there. Also check out my Discord for all sorts of discussion on games, and again, thank you for joining. Consider subscribing for more videos like this, and I'll see you later.